And when we use interval notation, if we are including the endpoint, we're going to use brackets. And brackets look like this. So they're like the square brackets. And if the endpoint is not included, we use parentheses. So that is just your regular parentheses that you hopefully are pretty familiar with using in lots of different contexts. So for example, what you're going to do, you're always listing the values left to right. Lowest number has to come first. Biggest number is second. So like this -2 would come first. And it's an open circle. It's not included. So I would use a parentheses. And then I'll put a comma. And then I will put the last number for the interval, which is 1. And it is included, so I would use a bracket right there. Sometimes these can be confusing because they look like ordered pairs a little bit, because sometimes you'll have parentheses on both sides, but they're not. This is an interval, and it just is telling us all the numbers from -2, but not including -2, all the way up to 1, including 1, right? Sometimes we will need to go all the way out to the end of the number line because our graph just keeps on going forever and ever. And in that case, you're going to need to use an infinity. You must always use a parentheses with an infinity sign. Okay? Because infinity is just the biggest number possible, which, you know, you can just always keep adding numbers, right? So like you could have 1,000,000 and 1,000,000,000 and 1,000,000,000,000 and a gazillion. But then if you have a gazillion, I don't even know if that's a real number, but it's a fun one. And then you just keep adding zeros to gazillion, it just keeps getting bigger, right? And you could just keep adding zeros forever, and you still don't get to infinity. Infinity is more of an idea than it is a reality, right? We can't really get there. So since you can't get to infinity, you got to put a parentheses there because you can't include it, right? So always parentheses with infinity signs. All right. Sometimes we need to talk about like this section right here or this section over here. So there are also mathematical symbols for that. If you haven't noticed in math classes before, mathematicians don't really like words that much. We like symbols for things, right? So over the, thousands of years, mathematicians keep like coming up with these symbols so they don't have to write words. So instead of writing or, this little two-letter word, like we don't like using 2 letters, we shall use the union symbol. So this is called a union symbol. And if the U is upside down, it's the intersection. And it is like saying and. Pretty much for domain and range, we're going to be using that union symbol. I just wanted to give you both of them here because they kind of go together whenever you're learning these things. So, but we'll pretty much be using the U to mean or for that. So let's look at some examples, and we're going to look on the number line. So if I've got example 1, this highlighted portion of this number line begins at -5, it ends at 1. So I would put, if I'm using interval notation, I'm going to put my lowest number first. In this case, Richard, do I need a parentheses or a bracket with that -5? If it is an open circle. And the parentheses, perfect. It is not including that -5. So we use parentheses when we're not including it. All right, then I'm going to put a comma. I'm going to put the last number, which is 1, for that. So, Samara, do I need a parentheses or a bracket with that one? Bracket over here. I like interval notation. I think it is easier than inequality notation, but we also have to know inequality notation because they might throw it in there on the test. If I give you a question and I don't specify, you can give me either one. You don't have to give me both. But we need to understand both of them in case they're written that way in the problem. So inequality notation is when we're going to use less than or greater than signs. So if you have a section in between two numbers, you still want to list your lowest number first, so you're going to have -5. And then when you're doing inequality notation for in between, numbers, you are going to always use less than signs. Now, it might be a less than sign, it might be a less than or equal to sign. You could use either one, but don't use a greater than sign. Technically, like, there's a way you can do it, but if you just stick with this, it will be easier. So, -5, I'm going to put just a less than symbol. I'm not putting the or equal to because a parentheses is the same as a less than sign. You don't include the number. A bracket is the same as a less than or equal to sign. So I don't want to use a less than or equal to right here because I'm not including -5. You're going to put the variable in the middle. They didn't tell us what the variable was here, so I'm going to use an X because that's what we typically do. And then I'm going to use a less than or equal to 1. You always want to use less than signs if it's in between two numbers. The only numbers that will make this true are the numbers between -5 and 1. Okay, questions there? All right, so next one they've given it to us in words, the set of numbers less than 3 or greater than 7. So I'm going to make myself a number line here. I got 3 right here. I got 7 here. So it's a set of numbers less than 3, which means less than means don't include the 3, but it's everything below the 3. And greater than 7, so that also does not include the 7. It's everything above the 7. Okay, so if I'm writing this in interval notation, I've got really like 2 separate sections that I'm talking about here. Here's a case where I'm going to have to use that union in this case. So interval notation, I got to start with the lowest number. So in my like shaded area, what's the lowest number that's here? 3 is like the upper end of that limit. This keeps on going down. Does it stop at 0? It goes to -1 and -2 and -3. What kind of infinite? It is infinity, but not positive infinity. Negative infinity. So if you have something that just like keeps going down forever, at the end of this number line, theoretically, although it never really ends, you've got negative infinity is like the lowest thing you can have, right? So if I'm going to do this, my lowest number for this first section is negative infinity, and it goes up to 3. And I'm going to use a parentheses with both of those. You always use a parentheses with infinities. You are using the parentheses with a 3 here because it's not included. Okay, that is just this first part right here. So I also have to talk about this 7 stuff over here. So I'm going to use that union symbol, or you can write the word or. Either one is fine. But that union symbol is going to be used a lot on like multiple choice questions and stuff that you run into. And then you are going to go. We are going to pick back up at 7. So 7 on this section is my lower number. Where do I go to? What do I stop at here? Over here, positive infinity. Okay, so that is the interval notation for this graph that we've got there. Okay? To write this in inequality notation, in this case, we're not talking about the numbers between 3 and 7, right? We're talking about the numbers lower than 3, greater than 7. So we are not necessarily going to use the same sort of formula here where we got lowest less than x less than highest here. If I want to talk about the 3 right here, the words really kind of help you like a lot here. You're talking about the numbers that are less than 3. So we're going to just say x is less than 3. Right? That covers the first part of this. And then you can say or you can use that union symbol still. Either one works. And then we have x is greater than 7. So in this case, you might use a greater than sign. But if you're talking about in between numbers, less than. Okay? Questions there? That's just some of the mechanics of how to give our answers. Now let's start looking at some domain and range. What's happening there? Actually, try these two on your own. Try these two. here you've got your less than and greater than times switched. Right here you've got x is greater than -7 switched to less than. And then your other one needs to be switched as well. Exactly backwards. On 4, it helps me sometimes to draw out that number line to the words. Here, I'll just put you between it. You don't have that, but it's great. Looks like we're kind of stalling out on number 4. Y'all spend more time, or are y'all already stuck? Stuck? Okay. Let's look at it. Okay, let's look at 3 first. Here's what you should have for 3. These here are arrows on the end, so that's telling us that we keep on going in this direction. So even though it kind of like looks like it stops at -9 or -10, that arrow means it goes past that. So you're going to have parentheses, -infinity, comma, -7, bracket right there. And every year I think kids' handwriting gets worse and worse and worse. I got to at least be able to tell the difference between your parentheses and your brackets, right? So try your best. I know it's a little line right there, but try your best. Some of y'all's struggling on that handwriting. Then 4 is going to have a parentheses because it's not included, and you're going to go up to positive infinity. We were looking pretty good on that part as I walked around. A lot of people were getting that. For inequality notation, in this case, since you're talking about 2 separate things, you want to do x is something here or x is something else over here, right? So you're going to start with the x each time here. And if we're talking about this first section, these are the numbers less than or equal to -7, right? Because they're all the numbers below -7, and we include 7 because it's a bracket there. So x is less than or equal to -7, union, and then right here, x is greater than 4. Okay. Questions there? All right, let's keep going to 4. It looks like a few of us are getting kind of stumped on 4. So whenever they say this, it's all the numbers between -2 and 5. So let's put -2 and 5 on our number line. So we're looking at all the numbers in between here. It says including -2. So if we include -2, that means we got a colored in circle right there. And 5, we're including that. And 7, which is weird, right? So that means that like the answers to whatever we're talking about here, it's everything between -2 and 5, including -2 and 5. And then for some reason over here, just the single number 7 works as well. Okay? So really we just need to worry about that -2 to 5 first. Then we'll just throw a 7 in there, which I did not expect you to know what to do with just yet. But this part we can do. So if we're using interval notation, we're talking about in-betweens here. Start with the lowest number, -2. Jose, with that -2, do I need a bracket or a parentheses? Bracket. Very good. And then my highest number on that section is a 5. Let's see, Sophia, for that, do I need a bracket or a parentheses? Bracket. Okay. And then we are going to do a union, and we are just going to do x equals 7. We're just going to add that on there. So we haven't done that yet. I didn't really expect you to know what to do with that 7 yet. There, if I want to do this in inequality notation, I'm going to do -2 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 5. I'm using those or equal to's because the numbers are included. When you're doing in between numbers, always just start with the lowest, less than, x less than highest number. And we're just going to do the same thing here, union x equals 7. Okay, questions? All right. Okay, so let's start talking about domain and range and how to find those. Particularly today, we're looking from graphs, right? This is where I have given you your trusty vertical line or horizontal line, depending on whether we're doing domain or range. Okay. So there are several different types of functions that you can have. Several different types. The first one is just points, right? That's all we've got. So if you have points and you don't have like connected lines, you're just going to be listing numbers, right? We're not going to be using this interval notation here because it's not in between numbers. It's just this number, and this number, right? So it seems a little backwards because the x-axis is horizontal and the y-axis is vertical. But if we want to know about domain, we need our piece of spaghetti to be vertical, okay? So we are going to go across here, and we're going to look at each point. So like this first point, my vertical line, where is that touching the x-axis? I know it's probably way too small in your paper. I need to reprint these better. It is -3, all right? So in this case, since it's just dots, we're just listing. So for that domain, -3. And then I'm going to keep going over. My next dot hits right here. Where am I hitting that x-axis? -2. And these are my x coordinates, right? I also could like list these points, but all right, I'm going to keep on going. I got nothing until I get here. I actually have 2 points right here, all right? But it doesn't matter whether it's 1 point, 2 point, or 1,000 points. For domain and range, you're still just listing the x value, right? What's my x value right here? 1. And only list it once, even though there are 2 points there. And then if I keep going over, what's my last one? I think it's actually 4. I know it's tiny right there for you to see. And you're going to end with the squiggly brackets. Okay? That's going to give you your domain. Alright? If we have range, we are going to do the same thing, but we are going to do it horizontal. And I'm not tall enough to do this well, but you guys can get the idea. So, start at the bottom, work your way to the top. Just like over here, we started at the left, worked our way to the right. Start at the bottom, work your way to the top. So that first one you can see, you got to have a horizontal line. What am I hitting the y-axis at right there? -4. So for my range, I'm going to have -4. And then I'm going to not do it from there because I'm not tall enough. But right here, this next, if we think of a vertical line right here, it's hitting my y-axis at -2. Then here, oh, this one is like right on the x-axis. Where am I hitting the y-axis here? What number is that one going to be? That one's 0. And then here, I'm hitting at 3. And then here, I'm hitting at 5. So in cases where it's points, you're just listing, right? Is this a function? It is not. Why not, Zoe? To a point such that same vertical line, right? Does not pass that vertical line test, so this is a no for a function. Okay. Now, sometimes, or most of the time, really, our functions or our graphs that we're looking at are not going to be just scattered points. So most of the time, we're going to be looking at ones that can be like 2. Let's go ahead and answer the last question first. Is that one a function? Is number 2 a function? No, it is not a function because it fails the vertical line test like a bunch, right? So, so I'm going to go ahead and put a no right here. But you can still do domain and range even if it's not a function. So you may have something that's not a function like this, or over here, is this one a function? That one is a function, right? So this one is a function. I'm going to go ahead and put a yes right there. Either one, you're going to treat domain and range the same way. Okay? So when we're doing domain, our line needs to be vertical, and we need to be looking at where it touches the x-axis. So always start over here on the left and go across till you hit the graph. This first little corner right here is the first place we hit the graph, right? So that's where our domain begins. What value do I have right there? -3. Okay, so our domain is going to start at -3. Is that point included? Should I use a bracket or should I use a parentheses? They didn't give us a dot or open circle, right? So if it's just a solid line, it counts like a solid dot. Like if they don't specifically show you like they do over here that it is an open circle, then you're going to use a bracket for it. It is included. So we're going to use a bracket right here. So for -3. And then you're going to go over till you don't touch the graph. So something's touching all the way over here. When do I quit touching the graph? Where does it stop? Right here. What number is that one going to be? That one's a +3, right? So we're going to have comma, +3. We also use a bracket on that one. Okay, so when you're doing domain, you should have a vertical line. Your spaghetti is up and down, right? When you do range, you're doing the same thing, but you're turning your piece of spaghetti this way. And so and always start at the bottom, go to the top, because when we do interval notation, we have to do left to right. If you give me an answer like this, I automatically know that you're wrong. I don't even know what the question was. I know you're wrong. Why do I know that's automatically a wrong answer? What about it, Caleb? 7's bigger than -2, right? Interval notation, lowest number always has to go first. So if I see you give me something with the bigger number first, I don't even know what the question is. I can tell you that you're wrong on that. So you always want to start at the bottom because it's lowest to highest. And so start at the bottom. What's the first number that we hit up here where we start to touch the graph? I believe that's a -4. And it's a solid line. Oh gosh, it's a big bracket right there. Okay, and then I'll go on up, and I'm not quite tall enough to see to do it there, but where do we quit hitting the graph? +3. And it's also a bracket there. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so it's when you're doing it from a graph, if you just use your high-tech piece of math equipment there, your line, and just check it, you should do pretty well on this. Let's look at the next one. Okay, so I'm going to do domain first. That means my line needs to be vertical. All right, I'm going across. When do I start to hit the graph? Negative, I believe that's a 4 right there. I know these graphs are way too small to see. I need to go back and print them differently. So I got -4. Do I need, let's see, Heston, parentheses or bracket with this one? Parentheses, good. Because we have an open circle on that, right? And make sure you're using where it hits the x-axis, because domain is x's, right? Some people will put 3 for this, because that's the y-coordinate. That is not correct, because that is from the y-axis, which is range, and we're not talking about range right now. So I got -4, okay? Where does my graph stop? It kind of like on paper stops there at like between 4 and 5, but what do they put on the end of it? They put an arrow, which means it keeps on going. So it doesn't really stop right here. Like over here, this line keeps on going up, so it's infinity. Very good. So -4 to infinity. Always use parentheses with infinities. Okay, we good there? All right. Range, same thing. We just turn our ruler the other way. Start at the bottom. What's the lowest y value where we start to hit the graph? Okay, it's going to be like right here. Right, that's the first time that horizontal line starts to hit the graph. We look at the y-axis. Y-axis is right here. That's 1. Let's see. Cannon, what do you think? I need to use a parentheses or a bracket with that one? Sure. Brackets is going to be for closed circles or solid lines. And I know I've drawn over top of it, and I don't think it lets me erase it. But we got closed circles right there and a solid line in between. So you're going to use a bracket on this one. The only time you are going to use a parentheses is if you got that open circle like we had right here. Like if that's where you stop, you're going to use a parentheses for that. Or an asymptote, but I don't know if I threw that in here. I'll have to look and see if I put any of those on here. I can't remember. I get a little confused on what I'm doing because like Math 3 and Pre-Cal overlap quite a bit, but Pre-Cal's way harder, so sometimes I think things that I do in Pre-Cal are really in here, but they're not. So I'll have to see. Oh gosh, I know because it's blind. See. All right. What about how high this goes up? Like if I keep on going up, where does it stop? Infinity. Good. A lot of people will say 3 right here because you got that open circle, and their arrow's not very high right here, but this keeps on going up, so it goes to infinity. And always use a parentheses with infinities. You can't get to infinity. Questions? Kind of make sense? All right, so I just want you guys to try these. Let's see, did I put any asymptotes on here? I don't think so. I don't think I put those on here. All right. I want you guys just to try these and do, as many as you can right now. You might not get to the end before I say time on this. We're going to do something else. But do as many as up here so you can check what you got. For your domain should be -2 with a bracket to 2 with a bracket. Your range is 0 to 4. Brackets on both sides because you got a solid line on everything. And that is not a function. Domain for number 5 is going to be -infinity to positive infinity. Now, -infinity to positive infinity is all the numbers, right? So there is also a symbol. Again, mathematicians, you see my shirt today? So many symbols. Does anybody know what it says? There's no pi on this one. This is B, and this is a, what kind of sign? Greater than sign. And then this is some notation you're not going to get to unless you take calculus. But this is the formula for the average using summation notation. This is a calculus shirt. This is not for you guys, but it says B greater than average. But it's so much fun because there are not any words at all. But if you like math symbols like I do, then there is also this symbol right here that you can use. Negative infinity to positive infinity is also called all real numbers. And it has a lovely symbol for it. If you draw this R that has like a double bar right there, that means all real numbers. So you can, like for range, you can do negative infinity to infinity. You could do that. Or you could put that, just that R. If you want to like reduce the amount of pencil lead that you are using, that's there for you. So both of those are negative infinity, positive infinity. You got those arrows on either end that just keep going in both directions. So this is a function. Okay. Domain for number 6 should be negative infinity to positive infinity because you got arrows on the end. It keeps going in both directions forever. Range, you're starting from the bottom. You don't touch this graph down here at like -6, right? Where do we start hitting it? Right here, -5. And you'll have a bracket with that. And then you're going to keep on going up. It kind of looks like it quits hitting the graph at 1, but does it really go past that? It does, because you got arrows on the end of that graph, right? So it keeps on going up. So this one goes to positive infinity. And that one is a function. I think it was Fernando had a good question on that for functions. Here we're only talking about functions. So it only has to pass the vertical line test. It does not have to pass the horizontal line test if we're only talking about functions. If they had said, is this a 1-to-1 function, would it be a 1-to-1 function? It would not, because it does not pass a horizontal line test, right? But they're only asking us about functions here, so that is fine. Okay, let's do these, and then I think I'm going to move on from the notes. So for 7, your domain should be 0 to infinity. Have to use a parentheses with your infinity, bracket with your 0. What's the range on that one? Negative infinity to infinity. Because even like way down here, you know, technically it doesn't look like it hits the graph, but this keeps on going. It's eventually going to hit the graph, right? So it's negative infinity to infinity. This is not a function. Okay, 8's a little tricky. 9 is super tricky. So whenever I look at 8, I got this big like jump in the graph, right? So if I'm doing domain, am I hitting the graph over here? It doesn't look like it, but I got an arrow, so it does hit, right? So I'm going to say negative infinity on that left side. Am I hitting the graph everywhere here? What about right here? I'm still touching the graph, right? Those are closed circles, so I'm still touching the graph. Touching the graph, touching the graph. How about over here? Does it still touch? Yes. So the domain for this one is negative infinity to infinity. Range is tricky on this. Anybody got an idea on what range should be? Feel like risking it all and throwing an answer out there? Okay. So if I'm starting down here, I don't touch the graph down here, right? I'm going to go up. I'm not tall enough to do it, but right here, I touch the graph right here. What's the y value right here? It is 1. Now, in between that, do I touch the graph? Like whenever I'm right there. Oh, can't even reach it. But in between those two lines, is it touching the graph? It's not touching, right? And the arrows go out straight, so they don't go up or down. And then, when do I touch the graph again? If I go up to 3. But is it in between 1 and 3? Do I touch anywhere in between 1 and 3? I do not. So this one is a weird one. where it's just the number 1 and the number 3. It's not the numbers in between those. The way we're going to show that, and this is why we can't use those squiggly brackets that you had, Sophie, because if I want to show just single numbers, I use squiggly brackets and I just list them 1 and 3. So this does not mean from 1 to 3. This means the number 1 and the number 3. Yeah, go ahead. That one doesn't have to have a bathroom pass. No, you don't have to have a pass if you're bleeding. If you're bleeding or going to throw up, please just get on out of here. Still going to play. All right. Is this one a function? This one's a little tricky on function. I see Abby shaking her head no. Do you guys agree? Why would this one not be a function? She's right. These 2 points right here, both closed circles. So it's not a function because it does not pass the vertical line test. It only takes one place where that happens. Right? Okay, last one we're going to look at together is 9. 9 is tricky. Okay, 9. Let's start over here. Let's see. Am I touching the graph over here? Yes. I am. I don't look like it, but the arrow keeps on going up. So we're going to have negative infinity. Okay? I'm going to go along, touching the graph, touching the graph, touching the graph. Do I touch the graph right here? If I go down here, am I touching right here? I'm not. That is an open circle. That means it's not included, right? So at that point, at negative 3, I'm not touching the graph because that open circle means there's a hole right there. So what I have to do is I got to split this into 2 sections. It looks like it goes all the way over to 2, but it doesn't because of that hole. So I've got to do this is a parentheses, negative infinity to negative 3, and I got to use a parentheses right there because negative 3 is not included. But then, like as soon as I get past negative 3, so it's like negative 2.99999999, right? I'm touching the graph again. It's only negative 3 that's not there. So I'm picking back up at negative 3, not including it, and I'm touching the graph, touching the graph, touching the graph. Where do I stop? Right here. The x-axis right there we hit at 2, right? So we're going to include from negative 3 to 2. Parentheses on both of those because of those open circles. So if you have just like a hole in the graph where it's not filled in by anything else, you have to sort of like stop the interval and then start the interval back at that same point and use parentheses to show it's not included for that. Does that make sense? That one's tricky. All right, range is tricky for this one too. Or at least the symbols for range is tricky. So right here, my lowest number right here, what is it that I'm touching on that y-axis? Right there. That one's going to be negative 2, right? I'm looking at the y, where I'm hitting the y-axis. It's at negative 2. Do I need a parentheses or a bracket with that one? Okay? It is a bracket. But I see an open circle. Why would I use a bracket? I have an open circle, but I also have a straight line next to it, right? And that line is included right there. And I'm talking about like a horizontal line through this. It does actually touch the graph right there, right? It's not just touching that hole. So I'm going to use a bracket right here. And then I'm going to go on up with that horizontal line. So if I could go up to this like very top up here, am I still touching the graph? I am, because of this arrow that means that goes up. So I'm going to go to infinity for this one. Although it's really tempting to stop at that like open circle that's there on that one as well. Is this one a function? Yes. Okay, let's see. I'm going to do Delta Math. We don't have time for Delta Math in the worksheet. Which one do I want to do? What's a good worksheet? We may or may not look at the Delta Math later. We're going to do the worksheet. Yeah, you put the notes away unless you need them out to help you, with this part. Alright. So this worksheet, we got 20 minutes. We should be able to get it done. My hope is that I can check it for you before we're done. But it will be your assignment if you don't get it done. But I think if you're working hard, you should be able to get it done. Yeah, all of them. There's just 12. Got it under control. You don't have high blood on your head. Alright, this is more of the same. Asking you pretty much the same thing, but for some different ones.